Hello, everyone. I'm Rick from Thriving Now, and today with Kathy Vartuli from the intimacydojo.com, we're going to go into dealing with feelings. And this is such a rich subject. We see so much emotional chaos and difficulty for navigating, hey, what's mine? What am I picking up from the environment and I'm starting to vibrate with? Like hearing a song in the background that you don't really like, but you start singing it in your head and then it starts affecting you. And and what are the ways that we have difficulty being with certain emotions and feelings and having that either feeling like we need to run away or fight, or we just don't know what to do with it and we freeze, and that affecting our life, our relationships, our work, and our communities. We've got people joining us from
100%.
around the world, and
Yeah.
we
Like
thank you for
out of
being here today.
Pakistan and Canada and all over the Pittsburgh. I love seeing people. One of the reasons Rick and I do this is, it's Sunday morning. We could be like watching TV or Sunday afternoon, but like a lot of people are just, and you're here. Like a lot of people are choosing to spend this time as downtime. And instead, we're here upgrading things. And I love seeing people from around the world because it feels like ripples going out in the world because we all model something different. And so I just want to honor you all for being here. And, we don't pick easy topics. Rick and I, we tend to, and I think you respond to that. Like, we're picking the things that other people are struggling with. And the intricate dance, if we're actually getting close to other people,
Yeah.
we start dancing with them, and it's like we're shifting. We're all kind of like our boundaries are somewhat amoeba, like they modify with time and a situation and how we're feeling and the person we're with, and the other person does too, and we're like dancing with each other and like, oh, so sorry, I didn't mean to step on that foot.
Hmm.
um, this is tough. And then we also have our own things that are coming up, and we'll be talking about where we have old wounds, where if someone gets even a little bit close to it, it can feel really like, oh, that really hurts.
Hmm.
Um, so this is just a challenging process, and I really want to appreciate you for showing up and being willing to look at this. I think it's going to give you so much insight and so much power when you interact with other people. Just an understanding in our framework to go, oh, okay, that hurts. What do I have to look at? Do I have to look at my own stuff? Do I have to look at the other person's stuff? Do I have to look at the relationship between us? So thank you for being here,
Absolutely. Thank you.
Rick.
So we one of the questions is, what do you ever struggle? Do you ever struggle with knowing if someone is actually stepping on your toes, or whether maybe you're feeling the sore spot just from behavior that they're doing?
Yeah.
I was subject to trauma and emotional numbness and all kinds of things growing up. I learned to adapt and cope, and sometimes those coping strategies are the things that are really ripe for an upgrade. If it's an old emotional or wound, there's an opportunity to do some inner work. But setting boundaries can be challenging, and especially if we don't know. Like for a long time, I was at the whim, and I use that term. It felt like things that were happening outside of me had a lot of impact on what my life experience inside of me was. And that created a dynamic where I started seeing the people as being the cause of my inner experience. And that can absolutely be true. If somebody comes and pokes you in the eye or steps you on the toe, your inner experience is going to be impacted by that. If someone
Mhm.
looks at you with contempt or disgust and rolls their eyes or ridicules, teases, these are not pleasant things. But I know for me that I struggled with even understanding that there was a boundary. A lot of us, just this concept that
Mhm.
there is this meeting place where our our desire to live in healthy connection with people sometimes comes
Yeah.
into conflict.
And it's not always clear. So I want If you feel like, oh, I struggle with this, there's something wrong with me, please understand that even the most savvy of us will run into problems with this sometimes. But we're going to give you a language and some context so you can more quickly parse it out. Again, as Rick and I always talk about, it's resiliency, how fast you turn things around.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do know that this can be challenging, so be gentle with yourself as we go through this if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, one too far. Okay, yours, mine, and ours. I love using physical things to teach boundaries because a lot of it's something our brains can grok. And I'm talking about, we'll use the analogy of you have this nice 8-foot fence we had them in Texas all over the place, wooden fence. We can't see through it, so we're not worried about the visual impact of the person on the other side. And we're going to just talk about a boundary that way. So imagine you're in a home, you have this home and it has this fenced in yard. If your neighbor like crawls over the fence and starts digging holes in your garden, it's really clear that unless you've invited them to do this, they've crossed a boundary. And
Right.
if someone is in our space, they've crossed a boundary. It's very, what we have, the things, our actions to do are say, hey, you crossed my boundary, get out. Or you'll tell them what they need to do to fix fix the crossing, get out of my yard, don't ever come back. And it's the neighbor's job to leave. So if they have come into our space, our job is to state it, because sometimes people don't realize they're in our space. It's not always as clear as a fenced in yard. And maybe the person isn't as socially savvy as we'd like. And I've done this, I've tried to be more careful about it, but I'll say, oh yeah, come on over anytime to someone, meaning in the social context of, please call ahead and arrange a time to come over. And I might not be available, but people do. They say, oh, come on over anytime. Someone who's not hugely socially savvy might take that to mean I can come in the yard. And then we can say, hey, no, when I said that I was being socially polite, what I mean is don't ever show up without arranging, and do not go in my backyard ever without my permission, and do not dig holes. So we can be really clear with people and realize that not everybody comes from the same social understandings, experiences. Maybe in the area they grew up in, it was totally fine for neighbors to come into each other's yard and take a cutting of plants. My mom used to embarrass us horribly when we were little because she was always looking for exotic plants, and she would always ask, but she would go to people's houses and say, can I take a cutting from your plant? And we'd always hide in the car. But we get to state the boundary and say what it is and realize that they may not understand it until we're clear. And the neighbor's job is to leave. If someone says, hey, that crosses my boundary, that person should should respect if it's in your space, if it's in your area, the area that's yours.
Mm-hmm.
So if the neighbor goes, oh, so sorry, and they go back to their yard, and again, you have this nice high fence that you can't see their yard. If they're digging holes in their own garden, unless they're throwing that dirt over the fence or doing it at 3 a.m. with a backhoe, it's really their issue. So just to give a clear, there are some things that are very clearly mine and some things that are really clearly yours. You want to dig holes in your yard and I can't see it, go for it. Does that make sense?
It does.
And
it raises a lot of questions, especially as we start to map something physical and clear cut, like a fence.
Yeah.
And in the same garden, it can get a lot more confusing if it's an our issue. If the fence needs to be repaired, the intersection between properties, who pays for it, who does the work? Those are questions that I've faced on farms and properties. I had a neighbor get a big dog that barked all the time, and they didn't clean up the poop. And so you had a smell and a noise. It made the back of our yard, our backyard, very, very uncomfortable to be in. How do we handle that? Today, we're talking about the discernment of what's theirs, what's the poop in their yard that is impacting us. And it's not necessarily all about the practical. We're going to talk about some aspects of that. But the first thing to me is okay, what is the ours? Where is the intersection? Well, we're neighbors. That puts us next to each other. We've chosen properties that interlock. There is an ours, whether the person recognizes that or not.
Yeah.
There is an ours. There's a relationship between us physically. The same thing applies in business. You know, there's an intersection when someone buys something from us or gets a service from us. There's an intersection that has been met. That doesn't give them complete rights to everything, nor does it, there's an agreement that has to be formed. But agreements are, we're real short on agreements and really high on expectations. Mm-hmm. And so this is discerning this emotional feeling boundary is extremely useful for us, for all of us.
And I just want to, for those of you that may not know the distinction between agreements and expectations, an expectation is something that I think is culturally appropriate and that you should know. I expect you to behave this way. Right. An agreement is I go to you and say, hey, this is what I would like to have happen. Would you agree to this? And it can be in writing, it can be spoken. And the problem is we have a lot of expectations, humans do. I expect that the store will have food. I expect that restaurant will serve me dinner. I expect that Rick will be warm and loving. We all have that. There's shortcuts that we have in the world, and those are good. They're useful. And when we're dealing with people from different cultures, different families, of course the fork always goes on the right. What are you talking about? We have expectations. Of course you hug me goodnight. If you don't love me. That may not be their cultural experience. And so we have those expectations can butt heads hard. People may still break agreements. That can happen. But if they're stated, they're a lot easier to say, hey, we agreed to this. What's going on? Versus you're a bad person because you put the fork on the left. What is going on? Mm-hmm. Whatever that is, if that makes sense. Okay. So I think this is an important part of this. And we're going to do some tapping in a little bit, but we want to get the context so we're all on the same page. Do you want to go over this, Rick?
Yeah, one of the humbling things about doing emotional freedom work with people is that we discover that we're confronted and discover that all people have wounds. We were exposed to things that created adaptations, and some of those adaptations are really beautiful, can benefit a lot of people, but it can still cause distress. Like some people are really overly generous. They give you the shirt off their back, even to the point of them freezing. And we can look at generosity as it being in balance. And some of that generosity comes from a really balanced place, and other times it's from like a desire to be valued and to prove that we're a good person. And all of us, I believe, have a mix of these things, that our actions and our motivations, our inspirations can get blended and confused. A lot of us have done healing and become less reactive. I think that was the thing that tapping really did for me. It gave me, I had been meditating for a long time. I felt like I had much more of a gap between what came up and what happened. But it wasn't as broad, because I needed to look at some of these things like, well, how did I react to someone else being angry with me? What kind of reaction did that evoke in me? Because we have sore spots. And when someone pokes a sore spot, something that you don't even necessarily know exactly where it's from, but it's a sore spot. You feel it. It's like, ouch. We all have sore spots. I think that there's a compassionate quality to this, which recognizes that the people around us have not been touched physically, emotionally, mentally with sacredness in all cases. When I went to massage school, one of our teachers around this subject said, if you assume that everyone that gets on your massage table has been hit in anger, maybe it was spanked by a parent, or been mistreated in their body, or been sexually touched, abused, or traumatized in ways, then it allows you to recognize that we as humans don't make it to adulthood without sore spots and wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows, in professional contexts, for us to treat each other that way. And one of the things that I want is for us to bring that kind of emotional sensitivity and awareness to our, in a kind way, self-loving way, to ourselves and also to those people that we touch, while also not becoming doormats, compassionate, empathetic doormats that allow someone to just say, "Oh yeah, come over, take everything, take my grill, take my backyard, drill a hole in my soul. It's okay. I know that you've been hurt. Me, yours, mine, ours.
Mm-hmm.
This is the dance."
Yeah. No, it's really challenging when we've been wounded in the past. I mean, I had so much confusion of how to interact with people. My parents were both pretty wounded and didn't have a lot to give. So I always felt like I was too much. I was a burden. And just walking through the world, I would see little projections. Like if someone was angry or annoyed with me, it was like, oh, it hurts so much.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was just them having their own life, and it was not about me at all. But where was the ours in that? Like if someone is having a bad day, are they responsible to be always cheerful around me so I'm not triggered? I don't think so. It's my responsibility to go, oh, I get triggered when that happens. I can let my friends know, people that are close to me, and say, hey, I've noticed that if you're frustrated, if you can tell me, hey, I want you to know we're great. And Rick's actually really good at this. He'll say, we're great. I'm just having a bad day, or I'm frustrated about this other thing. And then I can go, okay, I don't have to take that on. So we can ask for things, but my reaction to other people being unhappy was really my reaction. It was mine, something I needed to work through. And I worked through it a lot, and still I can, on a bad day, if I've had a lot of things thrown at me, I can be like, oh my God, why is this person mad at me? So it's a balance, it's a dance there.
I would like to amplify, something that you said there. We can see, to me, that example encapsulates a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have the awareness that I'm frustrated,
Which we don't always have.
Which we don't. A lot of people don't realize the level at which their energy is impacting themselves or others. They're focused on the frustration as opposed to the feeling of being frustrated. If I can deal with my feeling that, oh yeah, I'm frustrated, and that's a mine. And then yours may be, because we have a close relationship, I know that you're sensitive in a beautiful way. And also that if I'm frustrated, you're going to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can honor the fact that, oh, I'm bringing this into your world. Yeah. It's like if I brought a dog into just showing up with a dog. Oh, please explain the dog, right?
Yeah. We didn't have this agreement.
Your dog seems to be scratching up my front yard. What's going on?
Can you make him stop?
Yeah. Emotions, if I acknowledge I'm bringing this into our space, well, then we look for a way to interact in a healthy dynamic. Mm-hmm. And to me, that helps. It makes it easier to clean up. I have a friend who has 2 dogs. When she walks, she has a little thing that she ties around her waist that has cleanup bags in it.
Yeah.
And I took the dogs out for a walk, and I forgot the little bag. And when they pooped, I'm like, uh-oh, how do I It suddenly has become, a part of the community that I'm responsible for cleaning up. Our emotions can be like that too. We get more and more adept at being able to prepare the space, prepare each other for that. And
we're not always perfect either.
If you're walking around and you have sore spots, welcome to our circle. You're welcome here. We understand that. And not everyone does. And we really appreciate you here starting, continuing the process of parsing out and discerning
Yeah, I
our
think it's
wounds
really,
from others.
I love when people are aware, and I tend to hang out with people that are more aware. So there's a lot of people in my world, and there's some of them that I'm not going to let into my inner circle because they don't seem as aware. They don't seem as conscious of it. But there's also a difference between awareness and responsibility. So if we're asking everyone to be, and this is partly in response to a question someone asked about why do people not understand the feelings of highly sensitive people, and what can we do about it? Not everyone is aware. I mean, that's not part of our general cultural paradigm that everyone is required to be aware of it. And it can be really painful when we're sensitive and other people aren't getting us. So one
Or
thing we can do.
dismissing our feelings and telling
Mhm.
us that we're crazy, or you're just too sensitive. And
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
yeah.
Um, so one thing I've learned to do is, yeah, I've had to expand my circle because originally I was just around people that would say that frequently, and I had to go, okay. So, and I used this analogy earlier with Rick, is like, because we were talking about this. If someone's starving to death, they're going to eat whatever food is around them. If we're emotionally hungry for people, we're going to say, you, even if you're not a good fit, you don't get emotionally sensitive people, you're rude, but I'm going to have you in my life because it's at least a little connection.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But there's also, wow, I can request things. I can say, hey, when you say that, that really hurts. I know that's your paradigm, but it doesn't feel good. Are you willing to change? Are you willing to modify that? And they get to say yes or no. They don't have to act a certain way. Um, but we can also start going out and looking for more people, more, McDonald's is probably not the best choice, but if we're starving, we're going to eat it. But then we can also go, where is the nearest salad place where I can be better informed? Can I start building a relationship with other people that I want to let closer to me?
And one of the people said, don't forget that people who are not aware of sensitive people is that they will tell us to grow up, get a grip on things. Thank
Yeah,
you. To me, in this model of we're talking about dealing with our feelings and boundaries, the first is that I own that I'm sensitive, and that while I am in the process of continuing to grow up, that there are people that I'm not compatible with in close relationship, business partnership, even as clients. Um, and so so that's my ownership, and we can own that and recognize it. But then there's theirs. If they are someone who can't cope with emotions,
yeah.
and sometimes it's just like anything that's emotional
Well, they might
is
have their own wounds that are hidden behind that scab. We don't
correct.
know.
Yeah, so that's that. Okay, there is another way of being around emotions, and that can be, but not everyone, their sore spot may be that anything that's not falls into their category of grown up is too much for them. And the hours is okay, so it may be that in that connection, I don't I wouldn't show up if I'm feeling certain things, or I might choose to have a strategy that allows me to move away and have my space, my freedom. That discernment, without trying to make them, because as much as we believe in coaching, our coaching is to help an individual who's saying, oh, I have this sore spot and
Mm-hmm.
I react this way, and I would like to have a different way of reacting.
Yeah.
It's, well, we'll give some practical advice for the boundary itself. I We're powerless to say, well, how do I make this other person understand
Yes.
me and treat me different? That's usually not. I don't know about you, Kathy, but I've not been
No.
successful.
Well, I don't
Um,
think we even have the right to. We can request people make changes, but to demand someone else change to meet our needs, that's not. That's not. I don't even think it's really ethical. We may want that very badly. We can ask for change, but we can't force them to, because as adults we have free will. And if someone's saying, as long as they're not breaking a law, I don't think that's right. Like everybody has different wounds, and I think when I was talking about the scratch issue, like me trying to force someone else to be more sensitive when we don't even know if that would break them or not. Like they may not have the skill set or the experience to deal with it, or just maybe they don't want to. We have free will and we have choice. And there are people, being rude to someone is not against the law. And our community is, our society has generally said, well, you know, people are allowed to be rude. They can't go inciting violence. That crosses the line.
Let me ask you a question. Have you been in situations though where like you're not asking, you may ask them to change the boundary and they decide not to?
Yeah.
Are you forcing them in some way if you say, well, I'm not going to be in relationship with you any further if you continue to do this because it doesn't work for me?
I think we get to have that choice. We get to say, this is not good for me. Like it doesn't mean that there are no consequences to their actions. It means that I don't get to try to make them be something different. So me leaving is a consequence of their actions. The world, I think that there's an amazing feedback loop in the world. So we go around being who we are, and the universe is constantly giving us feedback, and we get consequences. So if I'm, you know, if I'm struggling and I'm rude to someone because I'm having a really rotten day, some people may move out of my world, and they're protecting themselves, or they may distance themselves for a while. That's a consequence of my action. Not unless they're trying to force me in some way or coerce me by something I need to survive. If if a boss says if you don't behave a certain way, you'll lose your job. It's a little more, you know, that's why we have a lot of protections in businesses, like so people can't take advantage of power. But if someone doesn't have something that we need to survive, it's like, this is the only water that exists. If you don't behave a certain way, I won't give you this water.
Yeah.
There's a power dynamic there. There's something that says I must do this to behave, to survive. And there's so many gray areas around this. There really are. I think that some people take that to a far extreme versus, you know, like, I want to have freedom. I want to be able to say, you know what, I just feel grumpy today, and I'll take the consequences of that. Versus someone saying, oh, and I think, you know, there's a lot of nuances, and people are struggling with where is the power actually recognizable and who perceives power in what way. And the problem is we don't all perceive it the same way. We can take people as a whole and say all people of color, all transgender people, or all women, all men, all employers. We can make big sweeping statements, but that doesn't mean the individual feels that way or experiences things that way. I tend to often view myself as not very powerful in relationship to other people. And yet I manage people at work. I have power. I have more access to money than some people do because I work at a job that generates nicely. So some people might see that as I have a lot of power. But if I don't perceive it that way, like, how do we balance that? That might be way down the rabbit hole.
We have the people that are a part of our community that care about this, and I appreciate that you touching on that, and more than just touching on it, seeing the level of passion that you have on this subject. And that's where the dealing with feelings on the hours side, if one of the things that I look at is, if I look at the boundary that's being set, there are some boundaries that are there to help people cope. They are because, like, one person needs, like, no perfume, okay? So the boundary for the circle can be less, let's not bring artificial scents into this circle. That is to protect people who have a sensitivity to smells. And I love the fact that where I live in Asheville, North Carolina, a lot of the dance spaces regularly assert, please pay attention to bringing in artificial scents. That's a boundary that's there. Now, if I look at the boundary, is it a thriving boundary? Is it designed for both people to meet with as much of their creativity and
Self-expression
their
and yes.
self-expression. It has it has safety, respect, and freedom. A freedom to take care of ourselves, a freedom, a respect for what our strengths and what are the areas where we really are going to need some support, and that
Yeah.
there is an intention for it to be mutually safe rather than coercive. And so that's where, the person that has the more capacity for it that we cultivate inside of ourselves to be aware of these dynamics, the more we can look at and offer as a strategy, a boundary. Well, what if we did this? What if we agreed to? And that, when that becomes the dialogue, it really does require that we have a sense of what our own emotional landscape is, and then have and check in with someone else about what they're feeling, if they're capable of communicating that, and then offering agreement possibilities where it's not so much a boundary like a wall or a fence that's trying to, good fences make good neighbors. I mean, that
Hmm.
there's a truism there.
It is.
In co-creating, if you want to have a kind of co-creation like Kathy and I have, the boundary is not to protect us, it's to help us to thrive in ways that um, nourish us. They look for ways to, yeah, let's not shit in the soup, but also let's, what do we want to put in it? And that's the hours feeling, and that,
Yeah. Well, I think it's really beneficial that you and I we had very similar values. We're a good fit for what we choose to create together. But there are times we have to say, please don't do that, or can we find a different way to do this?
I don't have
And
the
that's,
energy for that right now.
yeah, or that's really stressful for me. And there's times when like Rick's been tired or I've been tired and the other person really wanted to do work that night. We had something to get done. And it's like, I think there's a certain amount of honoring the person that's in the less powerful position in that sense. Like, I'm not feeling well or I'm really tired. And the other person, like, okay, what can I do? And this, what can I do to move this forward? Can we meet tomorrow night instead? Can I get some stuff together so we can move through it a little more quickly? There's ways to balance that. But if that was a bottom line for someone that you always have to show up and do work, neither of us would work with each other because we love
No.
freedom. Like, hey, it was a really long day today. Can we just check in for 5 minutes and we'll meet, tomorrow or the next day or something?
We both have faced, faced stressing ourselves out to the point of nearly dying, and we both have an agreement. We're gonna support and protect each other in not going that far. Should we go to the next slide?
Yeah. One clue that I like this, you can see if it works. If you or yourself or you are saying it or you hear someone else saying it, you're just like someone. That's usually a good indication that you're near someone's sore spot. Mm-hmm. So we'll say, you're just like my mother. That sounds just like my ex-wife. Like, oh, wow. I'm sorry that's triggering for you, and that sounds like your problem to deal with. And maybe we can find ways for me not to get close to that. Let's talk about it. But that's often an indicator. And one of our good friends talks about boundaries in that a lot of people try to keep their boundaries really close to themselves. They don't want to speak up early. They don't want to say, hey, that feels a little off. And they keep the boundary really close. And then if someone crosses that boundary, it really hurts. And then they're really, wow, that really hurt. And then they come down really hard versus if we can have our boundaries out here somewhere, and we say, hey, I'm noticing this doesn't feel good. Can we modify it? Then if someone steps over a little bit, it's not like, you awful, terrible third person, you broke my nose. It's like, hey, I just noticed you're crossing my boundary a little bit. So it's something we can kind of say, if we can talk early about things we notice, it builds up a muscle and it teaches a respect and a communication flow that we wouldn't have if we're keeping our boundaries here and we wait till someone really damages us to speak up.
Mm-hmm. And Gail asked, sometimes people override when they're really too tired and they do it anyway, and then they get wiped out. And I think that goes directly to what you just said about our boundaries. Like, if we only speak up when we are so exhausted that that spending 15 minutes on something is going to wipe us out. And I've been there. I've said yes in my life to things that took me over the edge. Whether it's your emotional energy or your physical energy or your just your sense of what's right for you. Like one of the things that Kathy and I will do is we will try to calibrate, like, well, where's our energy? Who's got the energy to do something? Whether it's a task that we will hand back and forth. That attitude is that there is an ours. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that I take from this dealing with feelings is that there is an ours. It isn't like I'm not responsible that she's tired from work. But if there's also this intersection of hours, it says, oh, okay, so you're tired from work, but I actually got 2 naps today. What and while I may not like initially be delighted with having to recalibrate, that's sort of like the initial reaction. Humans don't necessarily like to readjust. You know, the primitive brain goes, wah, 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 what about me? You can notice how you are with that and say, oh, okay, so my initial reaction might be something, tap, tap, tap. How might I care for myself and also care for the us, the thing, the relationship that we're intimate relationship of co-creating. I mean, that's a very intimate relationship. People that live together as housemates, people that work in the same office. That attitude allows you to, like, there's the container is too strong a word, but there's a thing. It's palpable, like the us. You know, the shared emotional field.
Yeah. The relationship becomes its own entity in some ways.
Exactly, and that is a common experience for humans, that we get that sense, and by dealing with the feeling of my own, being aware of the feeling as clear as we can get of the feeling of the other, then we can see, well, how do we navigate this us right now in a way that doesn't try to throw everything in undifferentiated.
No, I think that's beautiful. I think also if we notice we're near people's sore spots or other people's are near ours, like you were talking about, we have different resource levels at different times.
Yeah.
And how much responsibility we give the other person may be partly you're like, wow, I have no reserves. So, and people that don't even have the skills to heal, they tend to want to put the responsibility on the other person. I can't believe they hurt me like that. I can't believe they said that thing. Well, did you ever ask them not to? Did you ever indicate clearly that you didn't want to? You know, it's really easy. And I know I do this. The more tired I am, if my reserves are really low still, even though I know how to heal this stuff, it's just like, oh, that person was so awful. So, you know, humans do this thing. If we can be gentle, that really can help. And, you know, someone asked, how do you deal with people, like their sister-in-law never set a boundary, and then all of a sudden just cut her off. It hurts when people do that. So if someone sets that kind of boundary, one, it's important to respect it. There may be a way to reach out either through a third party or just, unless they said, please never contact me again, maybe drop an email or a card or something saying, hey, I miss our connection. I'm wondering if we can talk and try to heal this. If you don't want to, I'm glad to respect your boundary and leave you alone. Just gently saying, hey, I'm willing to talk about this. That doesn't mean you're responsible for them not setting a boundary. It doesn't mean that you were a horrible person if you didn't know that they didn't want this. But, you know, just gently saying, hey, I do miss us. I miss that relationship we had, the flow we had. Is there a way to talk about this and figure out a way that you can, you know, I'm sorry you didn't feel safe speaking up. How can we give a signal? Like, do we want a safe word where you can say orangutan, and that means we should get off the phone right now?
You're describing a very healthy kind of dynamic, and I appreciate that. I mean, that's one of the things we want to model is the possibilities for healthy dynamics.
Not everyone can do that.
And I want to honor here that when we're talking about yours, mine, and ours, someone who needs to separate and not engage anymore, whether it's me that needs that I'm using my right to flee. It's a primitive brain thing. I honor that some people are in a place
which
that
is better.
they cannot interact with me.
Mhm.
And that's okay, if as long as I let myself feel like, oh, and that hurts. That's hard. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. I miss
Mhm.
them. Their feeling is whatever it is, whatever what we can make up a story. Maybe we have an accurate story of what their reaction is, but at a baseline, the discernment is they're in flight.
Yeah.
And I don't chase people in flight.
Mhm.
I can offer an invitation, as Kathy said, but sometimes, feeling for, hey, is there really an energetic rightness, or am I just trying to soothe my hurt? Is my desire to reach out to heal the relationship me trying to soothe my hurt? If that's really like the big loud feeling, I just don't want to have this hurt. That's where I would suggest for people to do some emotional work so that they're in a place where it's not the driving force. I say that from witnessing this interaction with so many people where you're not as in touch with the hurt, and you're trying to solve the hours without really having an idea of what's yours and what's theirs in the
Well, it's hard.
emotional.
Yeah, it's really hard to be cut out. uh, Yell Shane, if it's a whole family and the children file suit. I haven't had a family do that, but I have had a friend that took something I said way out of context
Yeah.
and would never resolve, wouldn't sit down and talk to me. I reached out multiple times, and that friend actually forbade her husband and several of our mutual friends from talking to me as under threat of losing the community we had formed, and it was really painful.
Very painful.
Um, yeah, you tapped with me a lot through that, and
I
I just
remember.
I couldn't figure. I was really baffled because what I had said was taken completely out of context, and there was no way to repair it without crossing the explicit boundary of do not call me, do not contact me. And it was just really hard. And then other people were following what this person said, um, and it was painful. Did reach out to individual people. Some of them choose to be my friend too. Some of them didn't, and it was hard. It was a hard place to be, and I'm so sorry that you're in that spot.
Yeah.
Tapping can really help. I feel really blessed because uh, the woman that did this eventually like turned on several of the people in the community and banned them too, and they came back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like I get it now."
Yeah.
And we get to decide how much we wanted to interact, but it was incredibly painful, and I learned a lot about myself during that time, and had to just honor where they were. And I'm so sorry if that's where you are. It can be so hurtful, and we're out there trying to create love and create
Would you
abundance and
would you lead us in a tapping? We've not done much tapping here because a lot
yeah,
of this is structural and paradigm and like how we perceive ourselves and others and the us. But this
yeah,
is something that it's just fundamental that we're going to get
mhm,
people that are
yeah,
rejecting us and moving away, and we want to be
yeah.
in our own feeling right now about it.
Yeah, so if you can think of a time, and I'm sure I can't think of a human being that's past the age of 2 that hasn't had some rejection in their life, or someone set a boundary that's like, no, go away. So just think about that and just get into your body if you can. Move your hips a little bit, wiggle your toes, your feet, your ankles, and just feel the universe is supporting you. You've got
Hmm.
your feet, your butt, they're supported. Take a nice, slow, deep breath. Karate chop, even though it hurts.
Even though it does hurt.
They said to go away,
They said to go away,
and they took other people with them.
and they took other people with them.
It's so hard.
It is so hard,
And I feel this injustice in my body.
and I feel this injustice in my body.
I want to fix it,
I really want to fix it,
but I can't fix it without crossing a boundary.
but I can't fix it without crossing a boundary.
So I gently come back to me
So I gently come back to me
and send soothing energy to my hurt heart.
and send soothing energy to my hurt heart.
Even though this doesn't feel fair,
Even though this doesn't feel fair,
they never said not to do that.
they never said not to do that.
I'm going to do the best I can to take care of me.
I'm going to do the best I can to take care of me.
And I'm just going to be with these feelings right now.
And I'm just going to be with these feelings right now.
Top of the head, it really hurts.
It really hurts.
Eyebrow, I thought they were close to me.
I thought they were close to me.
Side of the eye, I thought they cared.
I thought they cared.
Under the eye, and they feels like they turned on me.
And they did turn on me.
Under the nose, and they took other people with them.
And they took other people with them.
And people I cared about.
People I cared about.
Collarbone, I feel like my community is broken.
I feel like my community is broken.
Under the arm, and it really hurts.
And it really hurts.
Top of the head, I choose to be with myself and all my feelings right now.
I choose to be with myself and all of my feelings right now.
And ask the universe to support me through this.
And ask the universe to support me through this.
Nice deep breath. And yeah, we do. So, Gail, thank you. We grow even though there's pain. I had to reach out to new community, which was actually really good for me. In some ways, I'd outgrown some of the people in the community I'd been in terms of what they were aspiring for. Like it was good for me to find new people, and I don't know that I would have ever broken away from them just because it was safe and it was a really loving connection. But they were at a place where I wanted to grow more, and I didn't have the encouragement I wanted to get in that. So there can be a gift in the pain, and sometimes it's a really thin silver lining. And I'm so sorry for the pain you might be feeling, but it is, we have to respect people's boundaries. If they say, do not contact me, that's really important, that they get to have their voice, and we don't know what they're struggling with. Sometimes it's not anything to do with us, and we just happen to be the nearest target for it, or the person that reminded them of something. So it's sometimes not about us at all, and we still have to deal with some of the consequences. And unfortunately, that's part of relating intimately with people. Sometimes our toes do get stepped on, and it sucks.
Someone asked, how do you deal with emotional vampires, which the ones who drain your energy out? In my personal experience, just being nice does not work. I believe that if we're in touch with our feelings, then can be clearer about what's a yes for us. So there are people, whether they just are more naturally, they like the feeling of energy flowing to them. And then there are people that are very grabby with their energy. For me, it does require that I be clearer about what's a yes and what isn't. And it isn't about being nice. It is about being real. Like, yep, I have the energy for this. Nope, I don't have the energy for that. Yeah, I can hear that you want me to have the energy for that, but I'm not offering that. That's kind of the short practical approach. But again, in this context of dealing with our feelings, getting really clear on like where your feelings telling you that you're out of balance with what you're offering, how your engagement is.
I love the body yes, body no for that.
Exactly.
And I think some people are really hungry. They don't know how to connect. And I'm certainly there for a long time. I didn't know how to connect with people. So I was starving all the time. And if someone resonated with me in a way that felt comfortable, it was like, more of that, please. I like really hungry for that, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So, recognizing if someone's just hungry and I don't have to feed them, and like, okay, I'm willing to hang out with you for half an hour and let you vent. I had a friend asked to hang out, and they're a wonderful person, and sometimes they're a lot of work, and I was like, no, tonight's not a good night for me. I'm going to take care of myself, and that was what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. So listen to your body, no, like, oh, that doesn't mean we can't be generous with someone who's hungry. We can just, but if someone has hooks into you, you can energetically. I love Donna Eden's zip up method. You can YouTube that if you want. It's all over YouTube. There's lots of places where you can find out ways to like energetically say no. I love Rick's as well. He just radiates so much love that the negativity doesn't come to them. So try out a couple things and see what works for you.
You can hear in our voices, we understand that humans are more complex than a simple fence analogy, but it's a good place to start, you know. And boundaries can shift and move with people. We can be really close, and then suddenly there can be a surprising, shocking, disorienting change in another person.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people where trauma, something anywhere, anything that's a trauma, changes the way that we relate in a way that the friendship is no longer even possible. I've also seen cases where someone is healed from trauma. And I've known in my life when, as I healed from trauma, some people were no longer a good match for me, or I was not a good match for them and what they were looking for. So we're complex. Things shift and change. I treat the loss of a friend with a lot of it hurts. I don't know that I can be detached in that, but I can also like recalibrate my energy. It's important to treat seriously people's stated boundaries, and not everyone is aware of them. We become aware of them when people sometimes shriek, or accuse us or feel withdrawn. If you know that someone is running from you, you can feel that. You know their primitive brain is moving them away. Our primitive brain picks up when someone we care about, or even someone who's a threat, moves away. And so we can be aware, oh, they're in flight, or at least in the moving away. When someone gets their hackles up, we can be aware that there's some kind of fight that's arising, and being aware of that allows us to put it, oh, okay, so this is at least an energy that another person is radiating that I'm picking up on. That's my interpretation, is that one of those things. And maybe they've become non-responsive. You know, they'll say they do something that they always would do before, but they don't. They say they're going to come to a party and they don't show up and they don't explain it. That can be like the freeze response. If you go to thrivingnow.com/brain, there's a trauma in the primitive brain presentation that Kathy and I did. And it's an important one for understanding other people and ourselves, our feelings of moving. I need to run. That's my primitive brain going, I have a feeling of flight desire. And when I want to get angry and fight, primitive brain as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenge to understand where people are at because it's dynamic. If I've had more rest, I'm more resilient. If I've had a bad day, I'm less resilient. And we don't know what traumas have been reactivated from people. I think we've all had times in our lives where we're like, oh, I'm over that. My life is good. And then something comes up and it pokes us and we're like, oh my God, I didn't quite get all of that, I guess. Yeah. So I think the more present we can be with ourselves and what's going on, the less likely we are to step on other people's boundary. And I also still think that there's going to be times when we step on people's toes and have to clean it up. I don't think that, as humans, interacting with other humans, especially if we're letting each other closer to each other, there's going to be times where like, ow, that hurt, or, ooh, I'm so sorry. I really do the analogy of stumbling in the dark, kind of going, I don't know where you're at today. I'm not really even sure where my boundaries are right now, but let's kind of dance around each other and kind of learn what works for each other, like contact improv, where we're like kind of creating it as we go. That's my analogy for boundaries.
Yeah, thank you. And we can all, Kathy put this presentation together for us, and I'm really grateful. Just a little tip here. If you are the type of person that says it's all my fault, I'm going to encourage you to recognize that there's your stuff, and you may be at fault for that, and then there's their stuff, and that's theirs. And then there's the our stuff, which could be healthy or toxic, but there is all three of those in every situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been domesticated to take it all on, this is our invitation to add those other two aspects to what's happening in any situation. Okay, yep, it's all my fault. And
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's really powerful. Thanks, Rick. Okay. So we don't have a whole bunch of time. We actually went deeper into some of this with all of your questions and thoughts, and really appreciate you sharing them. Just, if you have time now or you want to do it later, just write down some places you struggle with your own feelings, struggle with other people's feelings. One of my big things is I often feel like I'm not likable, or that people won't want to hang out with me. So if I write, if I have that written down, I'm like, oh, those people don't like me because oh wait, is that mine? They said they were busy. Maybe they're really busy. Or if someone appears to reject me because they're pulling away, it's really easy to say, oh, this is mine. I'm not likable, versus, oh, maybe they have some other stuff coming up for them. Maybe they were starting to feel too close. Like, it's, again, subtle. It's an intermixing of things, and often it's a little bit of everything. But if you have them written down, it's easier for it to be like, oh, that's one of my patterns. This is something that I go to and I struggle with. Okay, I can, maybe I can talk to someone or tap with someone, rather than just saying, oh, it's that. I do this all the time.
Yeah.
So
that self-awareness changes. It makes a difference in how people will respond to you. When you've got that level of ownership over your own feelings, other people can meet you in a different place. Yeah. If someone's actions are activating our sore spots, even if we know it's on our side of the fence, can we ask for a different behavior? Well, yeah. And the closer the relationship, the more that's important to have that dialogue, to figure out, is this a non-negotiable, an irreconcilable difference, or is it something that we actually can work out an agreement that's like, oh, that would actually not only meet our needs, but make it even sweeter. And people when we're negotiating boundaries, emotional boundaries, physical things, people have their freedom. Assume that. I think that's an attitude, that you have your freedom, and make sure that you're bringing your own freedom. If you feel trapped, that's another thing. Like, oh, I feel trapped here. Tap on that trapped feeling. Take a break from the negotiation. Yeah. Get to a place and get some help too, if you need to help boost up your sense of empowerment, safety, and your self-respect for your boundaries or what's right for you, and your sense of freedom too.
Yeah, I think it's really important, because we're always balancing our self-expression, other people's self-expression with our needs. It's complex, and I want people to be self-expressed. Mm-hmm. I've had people say, could you not swear around me? And I'm like, how important is that to you? Because I tend to get passionate, and I sometimes say bad words. Like, I don't mean them violently, but it's one of my expressions. And so we kind of have to negotiate. Like, oh, that really triggers me because I'm dealing with a lot right now. And that reminds me of my dad. Okay, I can really try, and I can't promise to get it right. Like, that's maybe right. we can try to help each other, and we still get to balance our self-expression and our needs with other people's self-expression and their needs. And it's not like there's not a cookie cutter where the puzzle pieces all fit perfectly together, unfortunately. Do you want to talk about the circle just quickly before we wrap up?
This is this type of self-awareness and working with your own feelings and looking at ways of perceiving others and coming up with an ours space, which is really mutually at least healthy-ish with difficult people, and really amazing with people that you're wanting to co-create with. This is part of our tapping support circle. We have multiple calls across days and times every month. We have wonderful team leaders, and Kathy and I do calls, Jean, Simone, and David as well. And this is what it's about, I think, is developing this emotional resiliency. So thrivingnow.com/circle can help you learn more. And we keep it as affordable as possible. So yeah.
Very affordable. So just in terms, just to wrap it up quickly, communication is a really powerful part of this if you can get your words, and they don't have to be spoken. You can write them down, you can ask someone else to share them for you, but we're guessing in the dark unless we use our words, and even then it's a little ambiguous sometimes. But if you feel safe, share what's going on with the other person. You know, letting someone know they crossed a boundary and what you do want. Like, hey, it really hurt when you do this. Could you, if you're willing to, would you do this instead? And sharing about the sore spots. If I know you have a sore spot, I'm a pretty caring person, and if it's not really constricting my self-expression, I'm gonna like, oh yeah, I'm glad to try to walk carefully in that area and not jar that. And this is really a dance of intimacy, and you're sharing different rhythms and patterns and needs in the individual moment and the joint needs of that relationship. So we're not going to always get it right, but the more we communicate, the more we share, the more understanding we have, the easier it can be.
Yeah.
So try, do you know the yes/no link offhand, Rick?
I don't. But support at thrivingnow.com comes to Kathy and I can help point you in some directions there.
Oh, I found. Oh, it's an error code. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll have to find it.
Yeah. So we'd love your feedback in the chat window, in the comments, or support at thrivingnow.com. Kathy and I, we're not scared of emotions, and we both. Well, sometimes being scared is an emotion, but I think that the more that we relate to people in circles and in community and together in ways where the conversation starts with, I'm feeling this. How are you feeling? I'm feeling this. Huh. Well, what can we do to co-create something that is right for us? Oh, well, we're both going to go get some food and come back. Or there's a way that we're crafting together an emotional world. This is emotional environmentalism. If you're an environmentalist about forests and rivers, this is a way to keep our emotional world, our ecosystem flourishing, to reset imbalances and take care of things that come up. It's not our default way of being yet. And we'd love to hear what you would like to see us cover next. Whether next is right now or 6 months from now, what is alive for you in your world matters to us. That's why we do this. So
thanks for being here. Yeah, thanks, Rick. This is a beautiful space with all of you. Thank you.